When it comes to Brewster's Millions Christmas, it's one of those films that, even though it's associated with a classic, it feels like it didn't need that crutch and could have easily stood on its own. So, to summarize the film, Morgan Brewster, the niece of the one that Richard Pryor played in the original, she is somebody who went to law school, seems to be doing decent for herself by convincing companies to buy up investments. But when it comes to her aunt, Mrs. Brewster, she looks at what her niece is doing, sees the results of what she's doing, and she questions what's going on here. But to add to the problems that she's having with her niece is starting to blow her off for holidays, and being that Morgan's parents are dead and they died in a car accident, and Mrs. Brewster lost Monty, who's Richard Pryor's character, she wants to be with her family during the holidays, and with Morgan showing that she's not interested in running the family business, not interested in her aunt, for lack of a better way of putting it, retaliates by basically shutting down all of Morgan's accounts. With that, she has Morgan's attention, and she tells Morgan pretty much within the next 30 days, you have to do these four things, all which deal with being a more altruistic person. And if she does it, she'll become CEO as Mrs. Brewster retires in the new year, and that'll be it. You get your money back, you get your cars back, all the property that was for some reason accessible to Mrs. Brewster to even close the accounts or take over. But if she doesn't do everything by in 30 days, which would be Christmas, she loses everything and pretty much will have to start from nothing. So, with given some startup funds of $2,500, and also one of Mrs. Brewster's employees named Andrew, Morgan does what she can in order to fulfill these different tasks and hope that by Christmas Day she can regain some semblance of normalcy and not end up in poverty. So, again, to the review section, as noted with the overview, this film really did not need to be connected with Brewster's Millions. And let me be very clear, I have not seen that movie, so I'm not sure what actually is connected or not, but I feel like for the most part, it's all about name recognition being a hook than it is really trying to be some type of continuation of that film. For nothing that is presented in this movie feels like if you didn't see Brewster's Millions, you're not going to get what happens in Brewster's Millions Christmas. So, considering Richard Pryor is dead so he couldn't appear, there's a real question of why did this film need that connection, because let me tell you, it's definitely good enough on its own and did not need a classic name, which honestly I don't even know if it holds the type of weight that was expected. Which leads to the second highlight. China Anne McClain, especially when it comes to her scenes with Rain Pryor, they make this film. And I would even give a special note to Rain Pryor, since China Anne McClain, she's consistent, she's good. But with Rain Pryor, I don't feel like she's really known for her acting career, at least in any type of notable light. But as Opal, who becomes Morgan's friend when she ends up in this housing development or low income housing, she gives a type of performance. She has a type of character which I'm not gonna say she's gonna make you cry, but she definitely presents that rare example of characters you rarely get to see in films like this. Opal is someone who is working class slash poor, yet she still has some type of joy to her. She's not that character who necessarily needs and is overly reliant on the lead to have some type of happy moment. Yes, Morgan does help her, but Opal seems like a whole person without Morgan being in her, or rather, Opal being part of Morgan's orbit. And I love it because too often with holiday movies, especially ones starring black people, it focuses on the Morgans. It focuses on the Wesleys from Wesley Family Christmas, people who are middle class, upper class, rich. And you don't really get to see much of the Opals. You don't really get a sense of what they're going through unless it's in service to the Morgans. So just having a character who feels a bit more real, who feels a bit more grounded, is so nice. And this isn't to say that there aren't people who are middle class rich like Morgan who live their type of lives, especially black people, but it just feels like there's such a heavy focus on the Morgan types that the Opal types become so rare and so precious, especially when they're performed well and also written well. Get into the low points. The character Andrew, played by Romeo Miller, is bland. And the reason why he's a low point is because when you take note of what Morgan's going through, what China Anne McClain does with her, we take note of what Richard Pryor does with Opal, two good quality characters. And then you have Andrew, who is probably the most present male character, and he's just the most bland entity of this entire film. He pretty much speaks monotone for most of the film. He's just kind of standing there, almost in the same pose each time. And while you get there has to be some kind of male in a Christmas movie because there always has to be a love interest, but he's just he ain't he really doesn't become much more than someone to look at and someone to add to the marketing budget. But honestly, he could have been an unknown and they could have saved some dollars. So the last topic for us is going to be Tiffany. And just to go into who Tiffany is. When it comes to Mrs. Brewster's company, Tiffany is kind of her right hand and Andrew is sort of her left hand. Andrew's task in the movie is to watch over Morgan to make sure she does all the tasks that Mrs. Brewster set out. And if she fails, Tiffany would be the one to become CEO over Morgan. Now, we established Andrew's bland as a unsalted bag of peanuts. But Tiffany, and this is why she's kind of on the fence, Tiffany's somebody who was given a background for it. We're told that she grew up in a situation similar to Opal in terms of low-income housing. We're told she came from nothing and she worked her way up. We're told that her mother is sick and that she, whenever she's not working for Mrs. Brewster, she's taking care of her mom. But despite all these details would kind of make her more three-dimensional, unfortunately the film diminishes her to that petty villain that's scheming all the time. And it's so frustrating because you see they could have did so much with Tiffany so that you could kind of be pulled one way when it comes to wanting to root for Tiffany because she worked hard to get to this point. Yet at the same time, she's going against China Anne McClain. So you kind of like, yeah, but I kind of grew up with this person. Their presence, their vibe, their charm makes it so I feel like I can't root for you. So you see there was a chance where they could have had this push and pull between the two. But unfortunately, instead, it's wasted. And while Tiffany's not as bland as Andrew, unfortunately, you do see a character that goes untapped and is unfortunately a waste. With all that said, though, with China Anne McClain's performance and Richard Pryor's, though it does enough to justify watching Brewster's Millions Christmas. Now again, when it comes to Tiffany and Andrew, characters that are either bland in the case of Andrew or don't do what they really had the potential to when it comes to Tiffany, but it's a holiday movie. Never mind, a holiday movie which is dealing with somebody trying to better themselves throughout the journey. So you can't expect everything. You can't expect something perfect, but at the very least, you cannot deny that this film definitely tried and did far more than you would expect from a film that's trying to piggyback off of a notable name that's trying to piggyback off of a notable title like Brewster's Millions.